What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. here. We got a great show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on DraftKingsNetwork.com, the DraftKings YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, all of those good places. Fun group of guests for you guys today, and I say group because we got a trio here, part of the great hosts and coverage of the UEFA Champions League on CBS going to join us as the Champions League is kicking back the round of 16 starting at 3 o'clock Eastern today. And so to help out with that, Kate Abdo, Thierry Henry, and Micah Richards going to join us here. Dad had a chance to sit down and catch up with them around the Super Bowl. And spoiler alert for you guys, I tried to invite myself over to Thierry Henry's house, probably the most famous guy that we saw at Radio Row, and he politely declined. And so I'm still reeling from that, but how are you doing this morning?
But it was a good effort by you. I mean, one of the more popular people around there, I mean, we're talking about worldwide as well, that you make your move. I'm glad you at least took your shot, even though it didn't work. I took my shot on the sideline with Jay-Z and also got rebuffed. So we both, got pushed aside. But we took a chance, and that's all you can do is really take a chance. So, I love Super Bowl week. I love Super Bowl, but I ain't going to lie. 8 days in Vegas, that's a long time. That's a long time. Then when they say 48 hours should be the tops in Vegas to visit there, 8 days is a long time. But they, not surprisingly, did a great job because they're used to hosting monster events there. So I thought it went very, very well outside of the rain early on in that week. But good to be home. Good to be home, sleep in you know how it is when you go away for a while to get back, sleep in your own bed. Very, very nice.
Vegas is the first Super Bowl I've covered, and it's not been many. I think it's like 8 or 9 now, that I have felt physically sore after. I woke up the next day after coming back and felt like I had run a marathon, and I have no idea what running a marathon feels like. It's just the kind of punishment that city tends to dole out. But, Dad, the NFL got exactly what they were looking for out of this experience. Now, I don't know how you'll quantify this with the experience around Vegas, but we got the TV ratings in, and that's certainly a good place to start. According to Nielsen and Adobe Analytics, the Chiefs' overtime win over San Francisco averaged 123.4 million viewers across television and streaming platforms. It shattered last year's mark of 115.1 million when the Chiefs beat the Eagles, and the CBS broadcast itself averaged 120 million, which bested the network's previous mark of 112.34 million for the 2016 game between the Broncos and the Carolina Panthers. So however you slice it, Dad, even though Nielsen's counting ratings a little bit different now and there's some things that affect this, it's the most watched Super Bowl and most watched event that we've ever had, which is basically what happens with the Super Bowl every year.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what happens, and it's not going to change anytime soon. Forgetting even the Super Bowl, we see normally in the top 100 shows, all television, all year, it's usually dominated at the top by NFL games in the regular season. So it's the most popular sport. Like I said, it makes the most money, makes about $15 billion a year. Roger Goodell has the goal of it making $25 billion a year, which is just amazing, though, with the gambling now into the money they're making, the streaming they're making now, and just how the sport seems to even grow more as the most popular sport. It's not shocking this many people watch it, tune in somehow, some way. Obviously, you cannot deny the Taylor Swift effect of this, of bringing more of the casual fan, which the Super Bowl is more the casual fan because of the ratings, obviously, but even more because of Taylor Swift. So kind of all came together to be the greatest viewing audience for a Super Bowl ever. And who knows, if it will keep going up, even if it stays the same. It's a ridiculous number. It's an absolutely ridiculous number for people to tune in.
Yeah, the Taylor Bowl thing's going to be hard to quantify also because you're right. It felt like there was certainly an uptick of a lot of people. We've seen all the numbers about viewership of, female fans and young fans and all the people that have come to the game because of her. And we certainly saw anecdotally, there was the great viral video going around of an adult father and son celebrating last year's Super Bowl victory by the Kansas City Chiefs on video, and then this year doing it surrounded by a bunch of their young kids, especially young daughters who are in there now and excited about Taylor Swift. So all those things that kind of seem to pull together in a very positive way. You also had a bunch of people that latched on in a very negative way now that were new for that party as well, with the crowd reacting very negatively to Travis Kelce and Andy Reid's interaction on the sideline, and now all of a sudden using that on TikTok to forecast things they think are going to happen negatively in their relationship. That feels insane to me. That basically, Dad, is a reminder that you don't go too deep in the water on TikTok, because that's where the zealots are and it gets a little scary.
And first, the positive side, not only did it bring, because I saw a couple of, the interviews where a father said now watching the Super Bowl with his daughters because his daughters wanted to see Taylor Swift, but also the fathers kind of like, younger than me, even or around my age or whatever, getting into Taylor Swift, right? Especially fathers a lot younger than me who have younger daughters. So it worked both ways. While the daughters were watching football because of Taylor, maybe they were turning their dad on to Taylor Swift music, and we'll have a growing number of Swifties. While we got a growing number of NFL fans because of this, maybe it'll go the other way as well. And yeah, quickly on that, I get it. The people that are saying a lot of that about the Travis Kelce bump of Andy Reid are definitely the casual fan. But when you start seeing it, on national TV, some respected people out there, saying, my kid is asking, Mommy, why did that guy push that old man? I mean, come on. I mean, it's just, this happens in football. That's about, is it a great look? No, it's not the greatest look in the world, but this happens on sidelines where guys have to be pulled away from their coaches, players have to be pulled away from one another. It's an emotional game. I never put too much stock into anything that happens on the sideline, and I'm not putting stock into this at all. There's an accidental bump on Andy Reid, and he screamed, did Kelce at Andy Reid. It happens. So to take any more out of it, like people are doing, like you said, Mike, the TikTok zealots out there, is just, and I won't say it's ridiculous because you don't know. The casual fan doesn't know as much as people who see football all the time. This happens. It's not the greatest look in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but it happens, and there's nothing to worry about here off the field.
Yeah, no, I had a bunch of people bring this up yesterday, and I said, yeah, of course, it wasn't the best look. I'm sure in a private moment, Travis would probably want that moment and interaction back with a guy in Andy Reid who he loves and respects and works with all the time. But then beyond that, what more do you want me to say? It's not like this is something that's going to linger with those two. It's not like it's something that I think is indicative of other problems. And so once we go past that, it was bad. Wish it didn't happen. It did. They've both moved on, and so will we. And we will move on, Dad, to something that it's our duty as gas bags. Twofold. One, I feel like now that we need to turn our attention towards next year and get ready to do a little bit of way too early power rankings of the NFL season while it's fresh in our head, and we can get this out here and put pen to paper and see if we're smart at all. But also lead dog with the question, Dad, as we go and do the ridiculously way too early power rankings for the 2024 NFL season. It also begs the question to ask, because, a spoiler alert, I think you and I are both going to have the Kansas City Chiefs as the number one team going into next year since they're the two-time defending champions. How realistic do you give them a chance to actually three-peat, Dad? Something that is such a rarity in sports overall, let alone the NFL, to actually happen.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're going to sit here and ask me today, I'd bet against it. It's tough enough to go back-to-back. Last time we've done it was basically 20 years. The 03-04 season, so, with the Patriots. So this doesn't happen a lot by any stretch of the imagination, especially in an age of free agency where teams still changed some back in the day before free agency, but now with free agency, even for the Chiefs, after they're packing up their lockers and they'll get to go to their parade together, that will be the last time this team, as we see it, is going to be together. There's going to be changes even on that team as well. The biggest ones is Chris Jones going to be back on the defensive side of the ball? Are they going to pay him? I think it's a tough bet to think they're going to three-peat, But I'll say this. Listen, I picked Buffalo to beat them. I picked Baltimore to beat them. I couldn't pick the Super Bowl because I was working it, but we saw how they came back and won. And I guess I'll just use the two words that everybody just continues to use: Pat Mahomes. I mean, and to me, their defense was so much better this year. As we know, they played better. But in the end, it was keep the ball in Pat's hands, whether he's throwing the ball or running the ball, and he's going to get the job done for you. So I don't think I would bet it that they would go back and win it on a three-peat. But, man, Pat Mahomes makes it hard not to bet it.
Yeah, it's kind of like having the is Pat Mahomes an all-time great conversation? Is he the GOAT conversation with Tom Brady? Is you're allowed to have it because this guy has been such an anomaly and this team's been such an anomaly so far. Three-peat conversation feels the same. Like, yeah, statistically probably not the best bet, but it's going to be hard-pressed to make me pick against them when we get ready to start next year. Yep. It's the same reason I have San Francisco number 2 in the way too early power rankings, Dad, as I think you do as well. Because when you look at this roster, it's another one. You talk about the advent of free agency, all this change that's going to come. San Francisco doesn't have a lot of change on the horizon. There's not a lot of free agents on this team, especially in the key positions. They've got another year of Brock Purdy where, oh, by the way, he'll have an entire offseason this time around, Dad. Remember last year he comes off and finishes the season with that UCL injury, and he's so injured, they're not sure he's going to start the season. And we heard after the fact that Kyle Shanahan approached him and told him, hey, if we can coax Tom Brady out of retirement, we're going to let him come out of retirement and do this because we're that unsure you could start the season. So now you're going to give him a full offseason again with Kyle Shanahan and the rest of these weapons. He's probably going to get better. This roster's still a juggernaut, and so they should be right back where they were.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. They are $11 million over the cap, and I think they could fix that pretty easily. They still don't have to pay the quarterback, as you mentioned, not a big-time free agent out there that they're going to lose. So I think we're going to go into next year saying what we said about them this year, that they had the deepest roster and maybe the best roster from one to wherever you want to stop, middle of the roster, than anybody else. And that's how we go into the season again. And can they get over the hump? A lot of this is falling on Kyle Shanahan. When you're there 3 times and you lose 3 times, it was kind of like Andy Reid in Philadelphia. Couldn't win the big one right. Got to the NFC Championship game. He would lose. And he got to the Super Bowl in Jacksonville and he lost. So it was like, when is Andy going to win? He lost his job in Philadelphia because he couldn't get over that hump. He'd keep going to the NFC title game, but not only one Super Bowl. That's when, and when he loses his job, then he gets to KC, and amazing, great turnaround there. Certainly it helps with Pat Mahomes, but that's where we are getting with Kyle Shanahan. 2 losses in the Super Bowl as a head coach, another loss as an OC, up 28-3. So there's going to be questions, and that's fair. That's fair to say. Now, I'll always say, and I know you will as well, it's the players on the field to execute. And I know so much is being said, and we can rehash it if we want, about the decision to take the ball in overtime is to not take the ball. And I look at it as a bottom line thing at times, Mike, is they took the ball, they scored 3 points, stop them, and you win the Super Bowl. I mean, I'm about players executing on the field. And I know it's Pat Mahomes, but you know what? They didn't go undefeated. They didn't win every single game. They looked human at times. So stop them one time, and you win the Super Bowl. So but this is what Kyle Shanahan is going to have to deal with. 25% in his 3 times in a Super Bowl on 3rd down conversion. So a lot's going to get looked at him, but also a lot has to get looked on as the players as well in executing their jobs, because there were definitely blown coverages out there. Look after the turnover on the ridiculous block or the punt that hit the ankle of one of the players, turns the ball over 1 play later, KC scores on a busted coverage. So that's not a coach's fault. That's a player's fault not executing on the field. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, but Kyle's the one common thread throughout all 3 of those experiences you described. Exactly. Not every player was on the field for all 3 Super Bowls Kyle's lost, and so that's why it's going to follow him. And you're right, it's unfair, but fair is the place that they judge pigs. The 49ers got rich people problems. Most NFL teams would kill to be where they are, this consistently dominant, especially without having to have gone out and had a $500 million quarterback. But they've been here long enough to where they want the Kansas City Chiefs problems, which is winning Super Bowls and figuring out how to string it all together. Dad, going on down the list here, 3, 4, and 5, you and I have the same grouping of teams here, both Baltimore at number 3, which makes a lot of sense. While they're going to lose a ton of defensive coaching staff talent, as they've had multiple members of that staff, including Mike McDonald, most notably their D coordinator, that's now the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, gone. Justin Madubuike, big-time free agent defensive tackle. Patrick Queen, a free agent at linebacker. Kevin Zeitler, a free agent at guard on offense. And so you've got a number of important pieces, but the core is still there. Todd Monken is going to be there for another year in Lamar Jackson's year. That offense took massive steps forward and could probably still add some personnel in the receiver room to get even better. And so I feel pretty good about their chances. And then some combination of Detroit and Buffalo following that up dad at 4 and 5. I got Buffalo in that spot, just seeing the way they ended the season, knowing, hey, they did it largely pretty banged up on defense. On offense, it was Sands, a number 2 receiver consistently a lot of times in that team, and they were still able to go through that because of the strength of the quarterback. I feel pretty good about Buffalo going into next year after making some tweaks, just because you got one of the dudes, quite frankly, at quarterback that can change things on a dime.
Yeah, we just flip-flop those, but it could go either way. You have Buffalo, then Detroit. I have Detroit, then Buffalo. Detroit has a ton of room on the salary cap. Buffalo does not. Buffalo has, they got a lot to make up there. I think like $50-some million. You mentioned Baltimore, some people they have to re-sign, unlike San Francisco we talked about. Madubuike, the big one on defense, he's going to go from making $1 million a year to over $20 million probably dollars a year. So we'll see. But I agree, Detroit and Buffalo are kind of interchangeable. Detroit young, they're getting to the party now. Dan Campbell has that. They're kind of on both sides of it. Buffalo is been there for a few years, and the expectation is get over the hump, and they haven't. And Detroit is now kind of just put themselves in the party. They've joined the party with some of the other big teams now, so let's see how long they can hold it there.
Yeah, exactly. You want to talk about someone who has earned their way to new problems. The Detroit Lions, who came into the season, said, win the division, and that would be great. Went and outperformed that and got themselves to the point where they looked like they should have won the NFC Championship. And so now we're allowed to expect more from them. Obvious spots to improve on defense there. Dad, the rest of the pack that I think is most interesting for us. So I had Dallas at 6, Miami at 7, which we were both the same on there. I had Houston at 8. You had Green Bay. I had Green Bay at 9. You had Los Angeles. And I had Los Angeles at 10, and you had Houston. The interesting thing to me is neither of us had Philly in this top 10, and I think that becomes the most interesting question going into next year is a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, and I would even throw in the Cleveland Browns. One side, Philadelphia, has the quarterback question answered, but the rest of that roster, especially defensively, went south in a hurry. Hassan Reddick's now asked for permission to explore a trade in Philadelphia. And then the Cleveland Browns on the other side showed, all right, with Joe Flacco at the helm, we got a roster that can do some things, but Deshaun Watson is still your big money quarterback. He's going to be the guy back there when healthy next year. And we've got questions about if he can lead to that point. Is there either of those teams you would feel more likely to include in the top 10 push come to shove if you had to right now?
I mean, if I had to, I would think more along the lines of Philadelphia because let's be honest. I mean, Deshaun Watson's going to be back, and he's going to be the quarterback because we know, and we have no idea. He's looked good and he's looked bad. I have no idea what to go there. Hopefully you get Nick Chubb back, who came back from the knee injury. He's one of the top rushers in the NFL, and I do like that defense. But Philly has been there, done that. That one's a head scratcher to me, except, we did give reasons of injuries and they really changed the linebacker position. So I think they may have learned from the mistakes they made last year in management on players they let go and who they need to bring in. But they are going now on their third year with 3 different offensive coordinators and their third different defensive coordinator. So that we saw what Gannon and Steichen brought. They were in the Super Bowl. And we saw when those guys left how it hurt a little bit, but injuries and talent on the field as well. So I would expect a big readjust by them because they had been, to the big game to do what they need to do to get back in at least the top 10, I would say.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to say act like the Eagles roster is now totally devoid of talent. The reason they were 10-1 to start, the reason we did have confidence is because of where it was. Vic Fangio feels like at least sure hands, a proven commodity on defense. Kellen Moore is going to be fascinating because I wonder where we're at in the eval of him as we get way too early and look way too far ahead to next football season. So, Dad, while we look ahead to the NFL season from next year, we did have a bunch of headlines about the people that are going to be coaching it and doing other things around organizations that popped off over the last week that we didn't really get to because we were out in Vegas mainlining fun and a bunch of other things. And wanted to get to them here, Dad. We talked about the Dallas Cowboys and their status going into next season. Part of that is going to involve a new defensive coordinator. Mike Zimmer, now officially hired as the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator to replace Dan Quinn, who's headed off to go and coach the Washington Commanders. Mike Zimmer, who began his career as a Cowboys assistant, or not began his career, but was a Cowboys assistant from 94 to 2006, starting as a defensive assistant and moving on up there, comes back to the fold. And, Dad, this is kind of what we expected with Jerry Jones, a veteran voice, someone with head coaching experience in Mike Zimmer, who comes over with a proven track record on that side of the ball. This is a defense that's pretty mature in their life cycle, and so I don't think the prospect of starting with some up-and-coming coordinator or up-and-coming position coach moving to that spot was necessarily going to be the flavor of ice cream that Jerry Jones wanted to eat. What'd you think of this?
I like this hire. You're looking when he was a head coach in Minnesota. In a lot of the big statistical areas, they were not going to go through them all. He was in the top 10. So he is certainly, got his chops on the defensive side of the ball. You mentioned first coaching. That was his first NFL coaching, though, when he went to Dallas in 94. He had been a few college stops before that. He was there for 12 or 13 years, ending up as the D coordinator before moving on to Atlanta, Cincinnati, and then head coach at Minnesota. I don't know if many people know, after Minnesota, the last two jobs he had. After Minnesota in 22, he was at Jackson State as an analyst. And then last year, what was the big story in college football, certainly in the beginning of the year? It was Deion Sanders in Colorado. He was an analyst at Colorado. He was out there helping, and now going to the Cowboys as the D coordinator. So I like this hire. I think this is a good hire coming off of Dan Quinn, who's had some really good defenses sans that last playoff game, which obviously didn't go very well, but I'm not going to judge a person on one game, even though a lot of times that's what we do, especially in the playoffs and certainly especially the Super Bowl, like we're doing with Kyle Shanahan now. But I think this is a good veteran hire for a defense that is, had shown itself at times to not only maybe be the best, but certainly one of the best in the NFL.
Yeah, get ready for a lot of double-A gap blitzes. That's the Mike Zimmer flavor of choice.
Yeah.
He's going to get them all up there, and he's going to try and make your life a living hell. So he's got a profile that's not all that dissimilar from Dan Quinn in that regard, and that he's going to put his pass rushers in really good spots to succeed. They're going to do a lot of that simulated pressure stuff. He's one of the early architects of that. That double-A gap was really something that was synonymous with him by the end of his time. But, Dad, I think for a lot of Dallas Cowboys fans, their hope is, hey, Mike Zimmer and an added emphasis on stopping the run becomes something that they talk about here. Mozzie Smith, obviously, a little bit of a disappointment last year. Their top draft pick out of Michigan, who was expected to come in and help out with that. They got pass rushers to burn. Micah Parsons is going to continue to be the center of that defense, and they'll get healthier on the back end. But it's going to be, and the Dallas Cowboys charge really is, hey, you got to figure out how to, in critical moments, run the ball and stop the run better, because we saw by the end of the season, both of those things became the issues for the Dallas Cowboys. His job will be on defense to try and remedy that, and at least from what we know in the past, that's an area that Mike Zimmer does care to emphasize. And so for Dallas fans, listen, I don't think it was ever realistic that you were going to go and hire some fresh new voice. And so in terms of this, and you look at how former players have talked about it, I've seen Harrison Smith, our buddy, and his former player in Minnesota, talk about how much Mike Zimmer challenged him mentally, the kind of ways he stimulated him. I do think when you've got a star on defense like Micah Parsons, who talks so much about how Dan Quinn helped him, that's encouraging to hear, because you want to make sure that star player feels stimulated as a guy that's going to be challenged to continue to grow, because that's how great players are wired.
Yeah, I think this was the way to go, to get a veteran defensive coordinator like this, because of the toys that you have on that defense, starting with Micah Parsons, for a team that was 12-5, for a team, obviously, like all teams, having the high expectations, but it just seems like one side of the ball or the other lets them down in crucial moments, right? Again, I called that playoff game against Green Bay and just could not believe what I was seeing, especially out of the Dallas defense, which had been so good, but at times it's the Dallas offense that all of a sudden there's no running game at all, and Dak's off as a quarterback, though he didn't have as many turnovers this year as last year. It's just they never seem to all be on the same page for that run in the postseason when we all see the talent that they have on that season. So I like this with Zimmer. I think he keeps the glue together on that defensive side, and you're right, his system, players are going to love his system. As a former defensive player, anytime you're in that attack mode like Zimmer is, you love that. You love to be on your toes and not your heels.
Yep, definitely there. So big change coming in Big D. Meanwhile, Dad, speaking of another place where the coach is likely on the hot seat, because we know Mike McCarthy walks into the 2024 season, seat firmly on fire, already had conversations about his job this offseason. I think the same is going to be said for Rob Saleh coming up with the New York Jets. Woody Johnson, their owner, had the time and had plenty to say about this team heading into their offseason, including this quote, that the discussions I've had in the last couple of months, they've seen me about as mad as I can be with what was going on with the offense particularly. We have all this talent, and we have to deploy talent properly. So I think they all got the message. This is it. This is the time to go. We've got to produce this year. Dad, that sounds like the easiest possible way of saying without saying it. Hey, Rob Saleh, it's put up or shut up this year. I went and got you Aaron Rodgers. I understand he was hurt last year, but we can't go embarrass ourselves in front of company the way we did in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they built a team around Aaron Rodgers, and then 4 plays in, Aaron Rodgers wasn't there. Not all teams are set at the backup quarterback position, and here you had a guy who was their former, number 2 pick to be the guy. but who had failed. That's why you bring in Aaron Rodgers. But they did bring in other talent. They could use more. Certainly, they need more help on the offensive line. But the defense, certainly a mainstay there that Jeff Ulbrich is running on that side of the ball. So when you're building around like Tampa Bay did with Tom Brady, you know you have a couple of years. Same thing with the Jets, and they just blew a year of that. You know, with your 40-year-old now coming back off an Achilles injury. So time is of the essence here to get things right.
Yeah, you know it's bad when the owner is telling your defensive-minded head coach, yeah, you're going to concentrate on offense now.
Yeah.
He said, we've got a D coordinator to handle that stuff. We got a special teams coach. We didn't have a backup quarterback last year, which if you didn't know Zach Wilson was going to be gone this year, let it feel sure now after the owner comes out and says something like that. But Daddy's right. Like, that's the criticism we all had from the outside. And I'm sure Woody Johnson watching from the inside is saying, hey, listen, I understand that once it got past Aaron Rodgers, I get it. It wasn't going to look great. But when you've got the Browns out doing what they're doing and a number of other teams that manage to go and win with backup quarterbacks, it starts to look a little ridiculous when you're not just bad, but it's downright abhorrent on offense.
Yeah, I would say, Mike, it would be about as good a bet as you could make that the quarterback behind Aaron Rodgers next year is going to be a veteran. Is going to be a guy that gets, because you never know with him if he gets hurt again or misses some games or whatever. But after everybody seeing what Flacco did, you know, now everybody will jump on that bandwagon. Oh, we got to have a veteran. But we had all said that in the beginning, right? When Aaron went down, bring in a veteran. You're not going to be as good as you were if Aaron were on the field, but bring in a veteran. And they didn't do it. They decided to go that route, and they stuck with it 100%. And I understand that if you're going to go down that road, but I don't think there's any doubt there's going to be a quarterback behind Aaron Rodgers who has NFL experience.
Yeah, you need, and I don't know if he's going to be available because he was with the Commanders last year, but you need the cash equivalent of a Jacoby Brissett on your roster. One of those veteran quarterbacks whose names you know right away. That's one thing we can be damn sure of is you're going to have seen this guy before. You're going to be very familiar with him because to this point, you got to keep your boss happy. That's where the Jets are at right now. I got to keep my boss happy so I don't get fired. So I got to make sure my boss wants a backup quarterback. We're going to give you one that's a household name. We're going to give you one you're used to seeing around the block. You're not going to have to squint real hard to make this one out. You're going to know right away. So the Jets, again, I have a feeling a lot of their ills change very quickly if Aaron Rodgers just stays healthy and on the field. But that doesn't change the discomfort that comes with playing in New York and having a pissed off boss. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and we mentioned off the top of the show, my dad just finally got back home from Las Vegas. He was there for over a week. It's inhumane to leave someone there for over 48 hours, and we had the entire sports media world do it for a week. So in honor of that, we wanted to kind of give you a best of that by going through and doing a bit of Las Vegas Super Bowl superlatives. And Dad, these basically write themselves, but I want to start off with this because I think everyone saw the branding around the Super Bowl. Everyone was so surprised that we even got here, all these things. And so we had this idea of what Vegas was going to look like in our heads hosting the Super Bowl. And then we've got reality. So I want you to start off with the most Vegas thing that you saw all Super Bowl week. What actually leaned into the bit, the best of anything that we had around there during the most important week of the football calendar?
This one was easy for me, and it's the same guy, and it's twofold. In media row where we were all week as we were sitting, on our DK set, watching Wayne Newton go into the pit in media row there and do interviews. Wayne Newton, man, about as Vegas as you can get, is doing interviews in media row, and he did the open for the Westwood One, who I was calling the game for. He did the open for it, and it was fantastic. So what's more Vegas than getting a Vegas person to do an open for the biggest game of the year and then also doing all that media? But seeing Wayne Newton walk into the media world over there for the Super Bowl was about as Vegas as you can get to me.
It was weird. It was like you're seeing someone out of the normal context. It's like seeing a teacher outside of school. That's what it's like seeing Wayne Newton walking around Radio Row. Carrot Top was kind of in that vein for me too. He was all over Radio Row. I saw he was on with our friends at the Dan Lebitard show. Carrot Top, the top is not as carrot anymore. There's a few other colors mixed in there too. Carrot Top's been living hard. I think that's very clear from the appearance there. Dad, the most Vegas thing for me though was the other things going on in Las Vegas at the time. Like, I walked into the lobby of our hotel one day, and we were staying at the Hilton at Resorts World. It's this massive hotel that's also got like a mall in the background that I didn't notice until the last day. And I remember walking back in there like Wednesday or Thursday night. So we're in the meat of Super Bowl week, and I walked down into the casino, and there's just a whole other convention for a whole other industry that's going on. And I see all of them down in the lobby gambling, their orange lanyards on. It's some biotech company. I have no idea what it is. And they have no idea what we're doing there. And it was that realization that, Vegas has just absorbed the Super Bowl into its portfolio of other events. It's not putting anything out. It's not displacing anything. Traffic was a little bad by the end of the week, but I was amazed at just how effortlessly Vegas absorbed the Super Bowl, and seeing full-blown other business conventions going on there the week of the big game was a reminder that our world, while we think it's very big, is still very small in the grand scheme.
Yeah. I mean, listen, they handled the NFL draft extremely well when we were there. To say Vegas and a big event is just kind of ho-hum. Yes, they know how to handle it, and obviously, to your point there, they know how to handle multiple events. So kudos to them.
And God bless next year we get to go to New Orleans. Sweet baby
New
Jesus,
Orleans.
that's going to hurt. Let's
Sweet
get to
baby
our
Jesus
best
in the king
celebration
cake.
video, Dad, which is basically just an excuse to talk about Jason Kelce. I don't know if you have another entry you'd want to admit to this, but watching Jason Kelce's adventure through celebrating the Chiefs Super Bowl win was a journey unlike any other. He had gotten so many Allen from the Hangover spoof credits during the week, but we saw him partying in a luchador mask wearing his full Kansas City Chiefs outfit. We saw him partying with Marshmello, who was DJing the family and friends party after, and we saw the video, if you're watching on DraftKings Network right now, that you're seeing of Jason in his overalls and luchador mask fighting against gravity with everything in him to try and stay up.
I mean, he if you see that video, the Chiefs that are walking in, like obviously Travis and Taylor and others, they're dressed up nice. He's got the Chiefs overalls, a Chiefs t-shirt, and a mask on. I mean, this was Jason. I mean, just staggering around. He won, man. He's having a ball. We all believe he's going to retire. He was full in on the Chiefs and his brother in the Super Bowl, and this man was having some fun. It was great to see. He was our live version of Frank the Tank. I mean, and it was so cool to see. I just wonder at some point, because you didn't see his wife Kylie anywhere. If you wonder if she just said, "All right, dude, go have your moment, and then we're done, okay? we're gonna be an adult after this." But man, kudos to him for having a ball.
You know what? If he is retiring, I'm sure this is kind of like hey, I understand this is your chance to go celebrate with your brother. What we really need now is bring Jason on the Eras Tour. Travis, I'm sure you're going to be going out there on the road, supporting your woman, doing her thing. Bring Jason on the Eras Tour and let him interact with the Swifties. Upon this rock, I will build my church. Dad, let's get the best celebrity sighting here. Who's the most famous person you saw in Las Vegas?
For me, it was on the sideline, and a little eye contact, not conversation, but with Jay-Z. So to me, and listen, there were plenty of stars around. We know that. But for me, it was, as I said, the guy that could walk around on the sidelines, and he did have a credential. I only knew that because I saw a little bit of the lanyard coming out of his pocket. But he basically had the credential in his pocket, did not have it on, and never got questioned by anybody. When this is the most secure sideline of you better have your ID or your credential, you better have your armband on. He had nothing and just walked around, and nobody bugged him at all, nor should they. So to me, out of a lot of stars being around there, it was Jay-Z.
So I took biggest pretty literally, and I went with Rasheed Wallace. New Heights, the Kelsey Brothers podcast, hosted a party. And all of a sudden I looked up to the left, and I just kept looking up. And Rasheed Wallace, who is by no means the largest player to play in the NBA during that era, but one very notable from my childhood in those early 2000s Pistons teams, just kept looking up. It was such a reminder, Dad, that NBA tall is so much different than any other kind of tall. And we see them all on TV next to each other, and we normalize it, and then you get to a game in person, and these guys just keep going. And the fact that it was Rasheed bleeping Wallace, who is one of the coolest figures from sports in my early lifetime for the way that he approached a lot of his game in those teams that he was a part of. So that one was pretty wild to see in person. Gigantic. I also feel like when you're that big, you have no choice but to play in the NBA, because if not, clothes are really going to be expensive, and you're not going to have really the bank account necessary to take care of it. So
it's very true.
That was pretty cool. Dad, let's go on to biggest winner from Super Bowl week overall. Coming off of this week, who ends up winning the biggest out of everybody? Can be, player, coach, the league, celebrity, anybody you saw out there during that week.
So Friday night, you and I, it was fun. We got to hang out. We get the name drop here with our buddy Darius Rucker, who played the EA Madden party, which Tua Tagovailoa was the host of. Green Day played there, and then Darius played there. Very late played there, by the way. There were a lot of winners of the week, but I'm going to say, and the one thing we have done whenever we see Darius play, a lot of times there's a casino involved. We always gamble after that. We always go play blackjack. Mike, I'm not going to lie. I was a big winner. I had a good night Friday night at the blackjack table, okay? You were there. You saw it. I think you were losing, unfortunately, but I was winning. It was a wonderful night at the blackjack table on Friday night. So I'm going to say me at the blackjack table right now, because a lot of other winners, but I took this one personal.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you could certainly throw the NFL in there overall. We mentioned this, the most watched Super Bowl ever, the most watched thing ever, coming off a week in a city where we never thought the NFL would have any affiliation if you'd ask us even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago or beyond that. They managed to pull that off. The city of Las Vegas, unsurprisingly, effortlessly hosted this. But, Dad, you're absolutely right there, which leads to the biggest loser, which was me. I didn't win a single dollar that entire week gambling. And to your point, I was up late every night towards the end of the week. I thought I was going to be able to manage my pitch count, and then I got to Thursday and cut it loose too early, and it ended up with me in utter shambles. I, like most people, limped to the airport in Las Vegas on Saturday morning with my dignity strewn about the street somewhere, no money in my wallet, and a bunch of just blurry stories to try and tell later on. So thank you, Las Vegas. Thanks for nothing. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. And as we get ready for life after the NFL season, for football fans, you can get some more football coming up today as the UEFA Champions League kicks off their round of 16 starting at 3 o'clock Eastern today. You can see simultaneous matches between Copenhagen and Manchester City along with RP Leipzig and Real Madrid on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus, who has the best commercials in the game right now. Before those games, you can also get ready with the UEFA Champions League today. And while I was in Vegas, I had a chance to sit down with the hosts of that in Kate Abdo, Micah Richards, and the all-time great Thierry Henry to check out and preview the knockout round for the biggest sport in the world. Take a listen. All right, this is great for us. We're a show that primarily deals in a lot of American football, and so we are ready to get a little bit of education for us and our listeners as we get ready for some very exciting Champions League football coming up. So to help us out with that, we got an all-star cast here. Micah Richards, Kate Abdo, Thierry Henry, kind enough to join us here as a part of CBS's outstanding Champions League coverage. You can also check out the matches on Paramount Plus as well. Feeling good after that. I mean, you were over here counting in different languages when we were getting ready.
Yeah,
I knew I had stars and greatness on the set.
This is new for me, Radio Row. I like what's going on here, man. I feel alive.
Yes.
What's this been like, seeing the worlds kind of meld together? I know you guys have a special you're going to do, Football Meets Football on CBS before the big game coming up. So what's it been like watching these two worlds meet?
Well, we were talking about it just a bit before. You know, sometimes when there is kind of a gray area where it is football, our football, obviously, because you said football meets football. In our side of the world, that's the game.
Oh, yeah.
When you flip it here, it is not. So it can be funny, like Micah just walked past the Gronk earlier. He didn't know.
Oh,
It's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that's the point. It's like when we walk sometime in New York or whatever, people will not recognize us because it is not the game. So that's why it was important to do it. Football meets football, and then people can have a bit of more knowledge about it, and it's going to grow like that naturally. But this is what's happening. It's the same when some of the big guys goes in Europe, people don't know who they are.
It's just a great occasion, though, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
When you're in the UK, it's all soccer, football all the time. So to come here in Vegas with the crew, with my teammates, I love them dearly. It's just nice to have a different, atmosphere. Absolutely love it, man.
Yeah, I mean, so
What about you, Kate?
I live here. I live in LA, so I feel like
Valley.
I get to have my feet
You see
in
how she
both
switched to
cultures a
LA
little
again?
bit.
Oh, yeah.
But it's very cool for us as a soccer show to even have the opportunity to be part of this.
Exactly,
I
yeah.
think
So you guys
that's
got J.J. Watt's going to be on with
Yes,
you on the
sir.
show, doing some great stuff. So another big beefy guy in there, mix them all in. But we've also seen these worlds kind of merging a lot. The NFL announced today that they're going to be playing a game in Spain coming up in 2025. That game's going to be I believe, going to be played and hosted by Real Madrid out
That's the
there.
big capital, Real Madrid. Oh, yeah.
And we've seen the NFL playing games in London. I know
Germany,
they're eyeing
yeah.
games in France. So you mentioned over there, obviously, football is not the biggest sport, but they're clearly trying to increase that global reach. Have you noticed more of a difference in there since the NFL's been trying to make that outreach?
Most definitely. I mean, the NBA did it and has been doing it for a while. Obviously, we're talking about the NFL. For example, it's a quick story. The way I came into watching for the first time a football game, so an American football game, it's a long story, but I'm going to try to cut it short. Obviously, growing up listening to NWA, I wanted that Raiders jacket. We talked about it before, the starter jacket. Obviously, my dad went to a dodgy market. So he got a fake starter jacket, and he got the Giants one. You know, the old school with the logo here, the NFL logo here, and then Giants in red. And then as the year they won the Super Bowl against the Bills, and we all know what happened. Norwood's, whatever. And then I ended up watching it, but it's through hip hop, technically, that I knew about the game, because we couldn't see any game at the time. So obviously, being able to go to Madrid, obviously London, will bring awareness. I think that's great for the league.
Micah went to his first NFL game in London.
Yeah, I went to the Titans. Yeah, it was amazing. It was at Spurs Stadium, and I'm not going to be honest. I don't know a lot about American
He is
football.
gonna be
but I'm
honest.
You
learning.
are going to be honest. I was like, what?
I'm going to be honest. I have to be honest because, but it is growing, and I like it. Obviously, JJ Watt, part owner with at Burnley as well, who we're going to see tomorrow, which is going to be cool. But I just like the tactical side of it, because when we got rugby in England, and you get the ball, you run, and I don't want to disrespect rugby, but the quarterbacks in this game and all the plays that they've got to remember, and then all the teams, and then the kickers coming on. I just think it's so good to watch now that I understand the rules. But yeah, I love it, man. I love it.
The Champions League round of 16 starting on Tuesday coming up. For fans over here who maybe some of them jumping in for the first time, seeing it on CBS, everything they're talking about, as we get to this stage now, what should people be looking for? What are you most excited to see coming up in this round of 16?
Well, it's different. Obviously, you have the group stages before where you need to qualify, obviously, to go to the knockout stages. And knockout stages are like playoffs. You win or go home. That's basically what it is. So you always have great entertainment because you have two games. So you have the first leg and the return leg, right? And then on the first leg, you try to see and assess what's happening. But then the return leg, if you're 2 goals down, you have to score 3. So it makes it very interesting because the team will open up and it will make it a great game right from the start. Then I'm not going to go too much into details about the tactic because it might be too early for that for some people that don't understand the game, but that's what it is. You know, when you go into the knockout stages, it's playoff times.
And your team Arsenal are in there?
Yeah.
Let's talk about them.
You know, for a very long time, we've been waiting to be back in the Champions League and trying to perform. Obviously, we're playing Porto. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to jinx it. You know, it's kind of weird because for a little while, I didn't have Arsenal in the Champions League, so I was kind of okay. I was watching the games, not you know, being nervous. Now they're back in. It's going to be a tricky tie against Porto. But like I said, you know, I said it before. Obviously, before we came to see you here, the game that I'm more excited to see is Inter against Atletico. Not so much because of the entertainment, but as a coach, I like to see also the game tactically, and I think that the Inter game against Atletico will be a great tactic battle.
Mike and Kate, what are you guys looking most forward to as we get to the round of 16?
Man City, I think I've said it before when on the show, when they had the weight on the shoulders of not winning the Champions League with a lot of money invested in the squad, obviously dominating in the Premier League, so it's to win last year and get that pressure off them. I want to see how they can play and just be free. They've had a couple of injuries this season, key players. Everyone know Haaland, if you like soccer, and Kevin De Bruyne has just come back as well. And they look now like they could be unstoppable. Man City always go through a run of 10, 15 games throughout the season, and it looks like they're just putting that run together now. So I'm looking forward to see how they can do.
For me, it's probably similar to what Thierry said. We've left the group stages behind. The group stages sometimes can feel like it drags a little bit. You got,
of course,
8 groups of 4 teams each, and you can end up having certain games that don't have much jeopardy on them. Now that we're in the knockout stages, it's like Thierry said, every game counts. You end up getting the bigger teams facing the bigger teams, and so there's just everything to play for. And in those situations where there's everything to play for is when you get the really good action on the pitch.
Well, yeah. I know everyone should be excited about this. It's a great time to jump in for people that maybe hadn't at this point. Like you said, the stakes are here now, and you're going to have phenomenal coverage here from this crew that's on the set.
Should be.
You enjoyed the show, though? I've got to ask you a question. You enjoyed the show?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
I see you guys go viral.
Who's your favorite then?
Oh, listen, I would never pick a favorite here, but I am sitting on the couch next to Thierry. And I'm trying
to early with Thierry Henry.
Such an obvious pick.
Listen, I'm trying to get invited over to his house. I'm trying to see if this is a hard no or if maybe
you
we
once
can.
already. Let it go.
Listen, I'm a glutton for punishment. What can I say? I played offensive line for a long time. I spent my time running my head into other big guys. So I'm no stranger to a hard head. I feel like we can break through. We're already making strides.
You're looking well now. The beard game is flames.
I'm trying to keep up with you right now, man.
No,
you put on a big hat for us before.
I have a little patch here, but you know we won't see that too much.
Me and Thierry on the same team.
So
problem.
I'm jealous of the line up top. So.
But why you're wearing a cap? Just let it go, man. Exactly.
Let it go.
That's what I'm talking about.
Be free with it, baby.
Let's go.
Be free.
Be happy with it.
What's your routine?
Absolutely. Got to get a little of the oils in there. Take care of it.
You know,
so
no
nice
lines. You know, happy lines. No lines, happy lines.
You're looking well anyway.
See, there we go. Bald and beautiful over here with my good friend Thierry Henry.
Exactly.
That's the first time I've heard that. Bold and beautiful. I like it.
Exactly.
I'm going to steal that one.
There you go. Guys, we appreciate the time so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Enjoy the rest of the Radio Row experience here, and we're excited. Hour number 2 of GoJo and Golic rolling along here. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Dad. I feel like we missed a lot of the musical chairs in college football over this last week while we were out in Las Vegas. Had a lot of guests. Our thanks to Kate Abdo and Micah and Thierry Henry for being a part of that great crew. But we did miss a lot of the dominoes continuing to fall in college football. I think because of the amount of coaching jobs that were up for this year and the amount of volatility that we've seen. And now, not an insignificant number. I don't want to paint this out to be like I'm in the doom and gloom cloud with, there's so many college coaches heading to the NFL. But we saw enough big-time coaches at big-time jobs leave and create a void that's now created this domino effect that has extended itself to Boston College, which somehow Boston College affecting Ohio State was not the butterfly effect in college football I had this offseason, but walk with me on this. So we obviously had the headline that ran a couple weeks ago before the Super Bowl that former Boston College head coach Jeff Hafley had taken the defensive coordinator job with the Green Bay Packers. A lot of people surprised by that. Boston College is a standing Power 5 school, albeit in the ACC, and you can read into that what you will coming off the most recent year. But Jeff had ties to the NFL before that. He takes that job there. And so all of a sudden, we go through, and now Boston College needs a new head coach. They go and hire former Patriots offensive coordinator and former Penn State head coach Bill O'Brien, who comes over there now. Got plenty of ties to the Massachusetts area, obviously. Grew up in Andover, spent a bunch of time in New England with the Patriots. He's got a son that's playing baseball at Tufts. So all these things that work well with that, which then leads to, all right, well, where was Bill O'Brien before? He was the new offensive coordinator at Ohio State University as Ohio State gets ready to load up its Death Star for this season. And so now Ohio State needs a new offensive coordinator. And this is where things got wild, Dad. Because in an offseason where we had seen some head coaches in college football, more in the group of 5 level, make the jump to Power 5 coordinator and leave behind that for the next level up of football, Chip Kelly leaves UCLA to take the Ohio State offensive coordinator job, was nowhere on the bingo card that I had in mind, and becomes, in my mind, Dad, the strangest domino to fall this offseason relative to the rest of the coaching decisions that we saw. A lot of the rest of the stuff, the moves from college to the NFL, I can understand given the people that were involved. And I can understand that Chip Kelly was probably treading on thin ice at UCLA, but man, it still does feel strange to see a Power 5 head coach who is getting ready to move into one of the Big 2 conferences go and leave and take a coordinator job like this at another team that was going to be a conference power against it.
I'm somewhat stunned by this one, and I can't figure it out. Like you said, and we talked about, he probably felt he was going to get fired last year. He didn't. So I'm sure he feels he's kind of hanging by a thread there. So maybe to get a jump on his next gig, but to it not be a head coaching job somewhere else in college. I don't know where, but there are tons of jobs available every year. So even if he was with UCLA next year and got fired, you would think he would be a head coach somewhere else. So I'm very surprised. And I'm sure he listen, we've had him on the show. He's very forthcoming. I wonder how much he'll get into why he made that it's a downgrade move for him. A guy that's been a head coach, in the NFL with the Eagles and with San Francisco and with coached Oregon. Now he's coaching UCLA and chooses to take a step back and go be an offensive coordinator, albeit for obviously an excellent team at Ohio State. But I'm as surprised as you are. I really am. I don't know, and I'd love to hear some explanation on why he did it. I'm sure, if he's talked about it already or we'll hear it. But that one to me, outside of the other thing that was interesting to me is we always talk about young coordinators and jobs. You look at Bill O'Brien, who took over there at Boston College, is 54. Chip Kelly is 60, becoming the OC at Ohio State. Wink Martindale goes to Michigan. He's 60 years old as well. So you're tapping into a lot of experience. Mike Zimmer going to the Cowboys in his 60s. So you're tapping on and on the experience. But without a doubt, from Bill O'Brien to Wink Martindale to Ryan Grubb going to Seattle from Alabama, which I'm sure we'll get to. The Chip Kelly move is the one that has me scratching my head absolutely the most.
Now, that being said, while from an interpersonal standpoint and from our perception of college football standpoint, it's a little confusing, don't get it twisted. Right now, there are 2 teams you can put in pen for the college football playoff. And I'm not talking about the expanded version. I'm talking about if we were still doing 4 teams right now, Georgia and Ohio State, you are college football playoff teams. Because, man, Ohio State took it personal this offseason. Getting embarrassed by Michigan for the last number of years when Jim Harbaugh was there, they decided they're done with the bull stuff. Between this hire, obviously, Chip Kelly, I said when he was getting talked about for NFL jobs, a lot of people had this image in their mind of the old Chip Kelly where, it's just the spread no huddle stuff. No. Chip Kelly has evolved in recent years in UCLA. There's a lot more in this tool bag. You've got him. Ohio State brought back Travion Henderson at running back, Denzel Burke, JT Tuamalo on defense, Emeka Egbika on offense, Jack Sawyer on defense, Tyleik Williams in the transfer portal. They brought over Caleb Downs, Quinshawn Junkins, Will Howard, Julian Sand, the former Alabama quarterback and commit from the 2024 class, had decommitted and committed to Ohio State. So they have gone about building this Death Star and now added one of the most accomplished offensive head coaches and voices in college football to their roster. This team is going to be a nightmare next year, provided the quarterback situation hits the way they think it should.
So let me ask you, and you mentioned about the 4 team, but we know it's a 12 team. Ohio State's going to get into that, whether they win the Big Ten or not. But let me go back to that. How much is Ryan Day on the hot seat? Now, 3 years losing to Michigan. Michigan has been going to the playoffs. Michigan is the national champs. We know the Ohio State-Michigan setup. Ryan Day has won a ton of games. We were saying the same thing about Jim Harbaugh when he was losing to Ohio State, but he's still winning everywhere else. They're right on the verge. And then, obviously, they go over the top. They win the title. They've been in the playoffs. So we know Ohio State will make the playoffs, but what if they lose to Michigan again? What if they don't win the Big Ten title because of Michigan again this year? Is Ryan Day, in your mind, on the hot seat going into this season?
Let's put it this way. He shouldn't be because he's a great coach, but because it's Ohio State and because it's Michigan and all the surrounding factors. Like if he loses to Michigan this year, where they're going to lose J.J. McCarthy and a whole treasure trove of NFL talent to the NFL, where Jim Harbaugh is now gone and you have Sharon Moore taking over as a first-time head coach for this program, if this Michigan team beats this Ohio State team, yeah, they're going to burn the entire thing down. Like that to me, and again, I'm not saying I would advise it. I think Michigan is the perfect cautionary tale of, hey, if you were have sold off Jim Harbaugh when Michigan fans wanted to and when most people thought it might happen, you would have deprived yourself of the national championship that had eluded you for almost over 2 decades. So it should be a cautionary tale for everyone else. But, Dad, we understand how these things work. And we also understand in new age college football how much money what they're doing probably takes. In the new age world of NIL, while a lot of these big-time schools, Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, these places that can offer you a bright NFL future, don't have to overpay in the same way that maybe other schools do who can offer that stuff. They do have things to offset that. I still can't imagine a bunch of guys who had NFL potential futures coming back to school was all that cheap for the collective around there. And so now that you've got that to answer for as well, I do think it adds to the stakes that are absolutely there for Ohio State this year. Based on the roster coming back, based on the moves they have made, and based on what their rival is losing, beating Michigan has to be the bar that gets cleared this year. And quite honestly, with everything else that we just described coming in place, it's always national championship or bust in Columbus. That's the state of that program. But this year especially is a chips in the middle of the table type year for Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. And it's not always the right move. And you're exactly right to say, as Ohio State fans and Ohio State players put it, that team to the north, what they were able to do when everybody was talking about giving up on Harbaugh and where they came back. But this is the year, right? You just mentioned all the parameters of why Ohio State should be back on top of the Big Ten again this year and right in play for the national championship, which I think really adds to it and magnifies that if it doesn't happen, that's going to be the end for Ryan Day, who I agree with you is an excellent coach. But we know the standards of that school and some of the top schools like that on where you need to be.
Yeah, the difference now because in terms of the offseason, it's so difficult now to prognosticate college football in February and March, and even when you get through the spring, because we've got multiple transfer portal windows, we've got all these different parts that are mixing up now every offseason, so the rosters are more volatile than ever, and it gets harder to predict because you're constantly trying to plug in what you know about a guy and what you think he might fit into the system versus what you actually know. And this offseason had more movement than we've seen in quite a while, even in this era, so it becomes difficult to prognosticate, but Ohio State, what we know about them should be in there. The biggest difference between them and Georgia right now is, Dad, Georgia bringing back the core that includes the quarterback. Carson Beck comes back for another year after showing you he can do this. Will Howard's been a really solid quarterback at Kansas State. He was a part of the Big 12 championship 2 years ago where they beat TCU, who's the eventual playoff team. This year, a little bit lesser in terms of the overall results, but between him, if you get Julian Sayin to stick around after Bill O'Brien left and what he might be tied to there, there's at least a question there versus an answer down in Athens, and that's probably the biggest difference between those two teams right now.
I love going back to Ohio State. Think of the matchup now. We keep talking about Ohio State, Michigan. Chip Kelly's offense at Ohio State against Wink Martindale's defense at Michigan.
Yeah.
Two, big-time names, right? Two big-time names now will square off in the offense and defensive chess match as we get the Chip Kelly offense. And for those, on this musical chairs that we continue on, Wink Martindale, the 60-year-old going from the Giants. He had been in Baltimore, going from the Giants now to Michigan to run that defense that Jesse Minter was running, but he went to the Chargers with Harbaugh. And before that, it was Mike McDonald, who was with Baltimore, but was also with the other Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, and now he's the head coach in Seattle. So the good thing for Michigan is Wink Martindale kind of runs that scheme. So we always talk about when there's new coaches, especially, coordinators, and then you get down to position coaches, but mainly coordinators. What scheme are you running? What do you have to learn? For those Michigan defenders who are coming back and been a part of the Jesse Minter defense, it's not going to change a whole lot, if at all, with Wink Martindale. So they won't have to go through that abrupt, oh my God, a whole new scheme, a whole new set of terminology. It'll be close to the same, and I think that helps.
My God, wait a minute. The NFL sky's not falling because an NFL coach is going to college football right now? I thought that's how this all worked, right? When they changed levels, that must mean something horrible and wrong is going on up there and the sky is falling here. No, you know what, Daddy, that is a good hire for Michigan in that term. All I'll say is we talked about simulated pressures. That's been the big buzzword this last year. It's been around forever, but it got talked about a ton here. There ain't going to be no simulation with Wink. He's just going to blitz the hell out of you. No. So if you're getting ready to play Wink in the Big Ten and you're squaring off against Michigan, you better have a plan for the blitz because you're going to get it damn near every play. Wink Martindale is going to try and kill you with hammers, and it's going to be awesome. But, Dad, we did talk about a lot of these signs of the times. While I don't think, again, it is indicative of, NIL and the portal are gutting college football, and it's this thing that's ruining the sport, and all these coaches are running for opportunities in the NFL. Most of those are few and far between. There are very few college coaches that have the connective tissue or the qualifications to coach in the NFL at the highest level. Most of the coaches that we've watched leave for the NFL this offseason have had those ties before, have been guys that have been up there, cut their teeth as young coaches, and then made their way to college, but always kind of had a foot in the door and we thought could be back thereafter. Then there's the Ryan Grubb move at Alabama, which becomes fascinating. And I think, Dad, indicative of just what a different place the Crimson Tide are in right now post Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer is taking over and starting off his tenure there. He brought with him a lot of people that were familiar to him, including his offensive coordinator from Washington, who had been with him along a number of stops as the offensive coordinator there until now. Ryan Grubb has taken the job as the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks on Mike McDonald's staff. And, Dad, this is a guy that was running NFL stuff. We saw it with Michael Penix Jr. this last year where Washington had one of the most exciting offenses in football. But for you, is it still a little jarring to see Alabama losing out in the game of musical chairs in this big a way this late in the cycle?
Yeah, but, I mean, listen to Ryan Grubb's career. I always say to Google these coaches, you talk about coaches in the stops that you make, but he's 47 years old. He started coaching in 2003, and it was at Kingsley Pearson High School. Then he went to South Dakota State, and then he met up with Kalen DeBoer at Sioux Falls, left Sioux Falls for Eastern Michigan for a few years, then hooked back up with Kalen DeBoer at Fresno State, and then at Washington for a couple of years, and then goes to Alabama as the OC, and he's now the OC in the NFL. I mean, that's the rise that this guy has taken. That's the resume, and now the OC for the Seattle Seahawks, which is an incredible jump to me of where he's gone. And he also may take, like you said, left Alabama, and is going to take the O-line coach, it looks like, Scott Huff as well, who came from Washington with DeBoer to Alabama, and now Grubb leaves and is going to take one of the position coaches with him. So, boy, oh boy, things we used to see. Well, I mean, we have seen coordinators leave Alabama to become head coaches. I mean, almost every year. Nick Saban will be replacing a coordinator. He'd be bringing in an analyst from the NFL, replacing a coordinator. But here, this coordinator didn't even get to do anything yet, and he's already gone.
So is this actually a sign that Alabama is healthier than ever? Because in record time, they were able to bring in a coordinator and already shoot them off to a lucrative, well-paying job on the back end. Dan, you used to have to actually coach at Alabama for a year to at least get that kind of glow off of it. Now you just step inside the door for a couple of days and the NFL is ready to hire you away. Maybe Kalen DeBoer actually has this program in a better place than Nick Saban. In this essay, I will probably not go that far, but it's a fun thing to think about here. And I don't know, Dad, to me, that is more about how coveted Ryan Grubb was. Coordinators that do come up all the way through college that run a system like his that did look as ready-made for the NFL as it seems to be. And I'm sure there's going to be tweaks based on specific personnel and all that stuff, but you don't see that a lot now. I mean, even still in college in this day and age, it still feels like you see a lot more of the tried and true spread stuff, hurry up stuff that's a little bit easier to install with the time constraints that you have that doesn't require quite as much. So Seahawks fans, I'd be pumped about this. If you did not watch Washington football this fall, go back and take a little bit of a look. This is a guy that uses personnel incredibly well, pre-snap motion incredibly well, gives his quarterback a ton of information. And Scott Huff, his offensive line coach, had been in Washington for 7 years. Like, that's a guy that had coached a lot of really quality offensive line groups at UW for the time being, including this last year, the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line for the best O-line in college football. And what I can tell you as someone who watches a lot of film on behalf of that award is that's an extremely well-coached group. You can turn on the tape and see similar technique all across the board from those guys. And I always say, if you're watching an offensive line and you see 5 guys doing largely the same thing, that's coaching. That's those guys being able to take in the message that they're getting from Scott Huff. So between him and between the coordinator, Seattle should feel pretty damn good about the new coaching staff that Mike Macdonald's building there.
And a lot of it, too, is we always see, with the talent they had, what happens now. Because look what he had in Washington. He had, a Heisman finalist and Michael Penix, and he had 2 1,000-yard receivers for the last 2 years. So it's like, okay, what kind of talent does he have? Well, he goes to Seattle. You got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I mean, you've got some wide receivers to work with, a young running back in Walker. And, Geno Smith, we'll see what last year. He's 20 touchdowns, just 9 interceptions. Lockett played in a few games as well. So they get squared away there. But he has talent, on that from that receiver side, like he did at Washington, to work with.
And, I mean, listen, they weren't healthy both for a long portion of the same time last year, but Howard Cross, Abraham Lucas, you had hit the year before on 2 rookie offensive tackles that both played very well. Howard Cross looked like he absolutely lived up to the billing as one of the first tackles, maybe even played the best of any of the tackles from the first round a couple of drafts ago. So you're right. He's walking into a cupboard that is plenty full offensively in Seattle. And then you look on the other side and Mike Macdonald's defense and start to really wonder there. But the game of musical chairs around college football hopefully settles a little bit now. Deshaun Foster takes over as the head coach of UCLA, former great there and former player there that had been on the staff for a while and now gets to sit in the chair. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get something resembling stability as we get ready for spring football. Coming up next, let's take a look at the NBA. It's going on, and there's some things that have shocked us. Next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic, and we've talked a lot about Big Vic on this show. Rookie sensation Victor Wembanyama for the San Antonio Spurs did it again last night, something that hasn't been done for more than 3 years in the NBA. A triple-double with blocks. Wemby had 27 points, 14 rebounds, 10 blocks, and 5 assists in just 29 minutes as the Spurs boat raced a garbage Toronto Raptors team. It's the first triple-double with blocks since Clint Capella did it back in January of 2021. And oh, by the way, according to ESPN Stats and Info, Wemby is the first player ever with 10 blocks and 5 assists in under 30 minutes played. The big man, after the game, got asked if he was thinking about the coveted quadruple double, and here's what he had to say.
As a second thought, yes, but I was trying to win first. But yeah, almost got a quintuple double with turnovers. So. It's getting harder to block shots as well, so I had to make that extra effort tonight, and because less and less people go at me, in the rim. But yeah, it's intimidation I can see it happen.
Dad, we always knew with Wembanyama coming in, he was this tantalizing talent, and the team has certainly lagged behind the player. It's not a great roster in San Antonio. There were going to be growing pains and have been for Big Vic, but him leading the NBA in blocks is the least surprising thing on earth, and you saw it last night. It was like watching the kid that hits his growth spurt early playing middle school. Basically, it's like watching my brother Jake play elementary school, middle school basketball, where hits the growth spurt early and nobody in his vicinity can get a shot off because Big Vic was just sending everything back last night.
I think 6 blocks alone in the third quarter, ridiculous of what he did. And you mentioned the 5 assists as well, and he mentioned 7 turnovers. Mike, I was just looking. Quadruple doubles, he obviously needed 5 more assists, but it's something to keep your eye on the radar, right? Because of what he did, and we know what he can do with the blocks. Nate Thurman did it back for the Bulls in 1974. Alvin Robertson back in 86 for San Antonio, actually. And Hakeem Olajuwon back in 1990 did it for the Rockets. And David Robinson did it in 1994 for the Spurs. So the 4 times 2 were San Antonio Spurs. So we'll see if he can make it 3, if he can ever do that. You mentioned beating a garbage team in Toronto, but Toronto had 8 more wins than San Antonio. San Antonio is a bad team. But the great thing about the NBA is you can be a bad team and still see a star and a unicorn like this, and it's fun to watch because we're seeing him grow. But the key for San Antonio, the team and the fans, is what can you build around him? Can you make this a contending team like Greg Popovich has done, with the David Robinsons of the world and other, the way he built around that team with the big men and the guards as well, and built championships and built dynasties there. Can you do it again around Wemby?
Yeah, let's put it this way. Obviously, you've got a long way to go in terms of the acquisition. I mean, you mentioned the depth of those rosters when you added Tim Duncan with David Robinson and you had Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili and all these great players at every level. Kawhi Leonard starting off his career there and how important he was to that team. You got a long way to go to that. But, man, if you're another player around the league, I understand San Antonio is never going to be some sexy destination for free agents, but, between potentially building through the draft. I don't know, man. The thought of playing with a guy this singularly talented and effective on the court, I'd imagine would be appealing to a certain section of the NBA population. Yeah. But in the meantime, gives us a bunch of freaky headlines and stats, and we get to watch him play in the Rising Stars game coming up, the All-Star game, which is going to be a ton of fun there, as he's no doubt part of the next class. He's next up, and as he continues to add size and strength to his build and frame, this is only going to happen more often. So you're right. We're on quadruple double watch from here on out. I hadn't really entertained this thought much, and now it's going to be there. But Dad, part of that is because it's been football season. We've been a little bit busy. We haven't quite been as tapped in the NBA, but we're going to be there now in the offseason. This is a show that doesn't just cover football. We cover everything. And so we need to make sure that we're getting back tapped in the NBA. But, Dad, in honor of that, as we have sort of Groundhog's Day come out of our hole right now, we've seen our shadow, and so there's not 6 more weeks of NFL winter here. We've got the NBA, so I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you've been most surprised by now as we've looked at this NBA season that maybe we haven't had a chance to talk about?
I think one of the biggest things, and I'd have to go back and listen to the NBA prognosticators before the season, when you're predicting, did anybody have Minnesota and Oklahoma City at the top of the West? I mean, they're right now with the second and third best record in all of basketball. Boston's first, the only team with over 40 wins. And then it's next Minnesota, 37, Oklahoma City with 36 wins. And then there's more than a few teams with 35. But what was that on anybody's radar? I know it was of them getting better, but was it of them continuing to lead? Because when you see teams lead that you're not normally used to seeing lead, you're like, oh, they'll fall off at some point. But they're not. The 3 is the Clippers. You get the defending champs, and the Nuggets are sitting in the 4 slot right now. Now, it's all close from 4-1. It's a game and a half. But still, that Minnesota and Oklahoma City are up there. I think that's great. For the league, in a league of building superstar teams, and then you kind of had Denver finally crossed that finish line last year with a couple, guys that were there with Murray and with Jokic. But I would say that's one of the more surprising. I have a couple others, but that's one of the more surprising things to me, that those two teams up at the top of the West.
Yeah, I would say really the whole trio of teams at the top of the West. I mean, the Clippers, it working as well with James Harden as it has out in Los Angeles. The fact that this team full of the aging stars that we've talked about has gotten it together to this point where, yeah, you've got that as the 1, 2, and 3 seed out there. To your point, Dad, about had anyone predicted this for Minnesota going into the season, Kevin Pelton over at ESPN had projected the Timberwolves to have the second highest average win for the upcoming season this year. So I think some people looked at the parts involved and said, hey, we can make this work a little better than maybe we expected going into this, right? That combination of Karl Anthony Towns and the big men there finding a way to be working complementary parts, also with Anthony Edwards as well. So I'm with you. I was surprised by that being the top of the Western Conference. The Denver Nuggets getting boat raced by the Milwaukee Bucks too last night. Just a weird sidebar there as well. But Dad, I'd say for the other one, for me, looking over in the Eastern Conference here, your hometown here, the Cleveland Cavaliers, second place in the Eastern Conference right now. Everyone else we've kind of been used to, right? The New York Knicks sitting at the 4 spot have been under Tom Thibodeau, a team that's been a pretty consistent performer, even if we have questions about their ceiling overall. The Boston Celtics being fully out front in first place surprises nobody at this point, although they don't have a top 10 scorer, which is certainly something. And then, the Milwaukee Bucks being in the mix as well. But how about the Cavs of the 2 seed, Dad? Are you beaming with Cleveland pride right now?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, what a run they've been on. The 17-1 at home since December, but losing, though, to the 76ers. Tyrese Maxey had himself a game last night. Remember, the 76ers without Embiid sitting in the 5 slot, but what a run that they've had, 9-1 in their last 10 games. So, yeah, that has definitely been a surprising thing, given we keep saying Boston, Milwaukee, and we had said Philadelphia, but now Embiid's out. The Knicks, who lose, and the refs actually admit that shouldn't have been a foul called on Jalen Brunson. The rare admittance by the officials that they got it wrong. But yeah, Cleveland being in the mix of all that has been pretty surprising as well. I think one of the things that I'll say last about it, and it'll be more toward the end of the year, we talk about the Lakers and Warriors and that matchup with Curry and LeBron a while ago in the double overtime game. But then you say, well, okay, it's a team that's sitting ninth and 10th in the West. To me, the one big storyline is going to be at the end of the year. I think it's the end of the core in Golden State, and you wonder if LeBron's going to be on the Lakers next year, right? I mean, there was that flirtation of does he get traded? That got shut down quickly, but what is his future in LA next year? Could he be gone from there as well? So truly kind of the end of what we've seen the last few years in LA, and also what we've seen for a decent amount of years in Golden State.
It's going to make for an exciting last 30 or so games that we have coming up around and after the All-Star break as we march towards the postseason. But coming up next, I know we said we were done with football, but let's take a little bit of detour. We got some new Hall of Fame eligibility announced for the upcoming class here with some names that make me feel very, very old. Dad, we took some time last week to acknowledge it, but also wanted to give it up again for the 2024 NFL Hall of Fame class. Dwight Freeney, Randy Gradishar, Devin Hester, Andre Johnson, Steve McMichael, Julius Peppers, and Patrick Willis, all going to have their names enshrined in Canton this upcoming summer as members of the 2024 Hall of Fame class here. Awesome, incredibly deserving group overall, Dad. Some great players that were the guys, and we're getting to this point now where obviously you've covered this sport and so many for multiple decades now. We're getting to the guys that I watched growing up, the guys that were the stars of my youth that are starting to get into the Hall of Fame right now. And so it's an interesting reckoning point as we look at both this group and then start to take a look at the first-time Hall of Fame candidates for the upcoming 2025 Hall of Fame class too.
Yeah, really are. I was happy to see, like I said, Dwight Freeney and Julius Peppers, who came out in the same class in 2002, go in together. Dwight Freeney was kind of in that era of the tweener who didn't play in my era, but became big in the next era, right? He was like 6'2", 6'1", 6'2", like 255, ran a ridiculous 40 at the combine, but was kind of too small for a D end and too big for a linebacker. But then found his way to be that edge rusher with the incredible spin move to the tune of 125 and a half sacks in the Hall of Fame, where Julius Peppers was kind of the taller, basketball playing, kind of freakish athlete who made it in the same class. So I love that. Obviously the story with Steve McMichael, as we talked about, just so sad with how ALS has ravaged his body there. So congrats to him, to all of them. Devin Hester deserved to be in. More attention needs to be to the special teams, and I'm glad Hester got in. But then, like you said, we move on to the next class, especially of first-timers who have that shot to get in on the first ballot.
There are a lot of great names in this class that I want to touch on. But, Dad, we are going to get, finally, the debate IRL in real life of one of the greatest sports talk topics that we've had for such a long time here. Is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer now coming to Sports Talk airwaves near you this summer? Eli Manning eligible for the first time in 2025. Dad, where have you been on this? I'm sure we've had this debate even on air plenty of times over the years, but Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest postseason artists, has taken down the Patriot killer himself, but a guy who we know had a pick-6 problem for a while, all these misgivings about the regular season here. How do we ultimately factor in Eli's Hall of Fame candidacy at this point?
So the one thing you talk about with Hall of Famers is, were they the best at their position for a period of time? And I don't really know if we could ever say that about Eli, right? I let me put it this way, and this is what I've always said about Eli. I think Eli eventually gets in. I don't think Eli gets in on the first ballot. I mean, you got those 2 Super Bowl wins, and they're both against New England, the team. So that's obviously, I think, what's going to put him in there. But I don't think anybody ever considered him the best, of his era for a bit, like his brother Peyton. So I don't think he gets in on the first shot. I do think he eventually does get in. How long that takes, I don't know. But to win those Super Bowls the way they did, to be the MVP both times, the team they beat both times, I do think he eventually will get in. And I think he'll be part of a 3-brother tandem, and he and Peyton eventually will be in. I think J.J. Watt, T.J. Watt eventually be in. And then, of course, the Kelsey brothers, I think, will both be in as well. But Eli, I think it'll be a little bit before he gets in. How about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. If he does, he's going to have to wait. On the surface, it's one of those where it doesn't pass the vibe test right away, but we do prorate postseason accomplishment, and he's got plenty of that in some of the biggest games and stories in the NFL. I mean, thwarting the only real modern attempt at getting to an undefeated season in the way he did, certainly deserving of credit in a lot of ways. The rest of this roster, though, Dad, and to your point about him not getting in the first time, there's a couple of guys that should absolutely be in consideration with that. I understand that his career ended up getting cut short, but man, it's going to be hard to convince me that Luke Kuechly's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, 7-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, all in just 8 seasons. That guy, to your point about was he the best at what he did for a stretch? The answer was yes. Luke Kuechly was a full-blown dude. He's the best football player I have ever played against, albeit in college, but this guy is just different in every way, shape, and form.
Completely agree. And I have, I think, 4 on this list as first-timers who I would put in on the first ballot. And I think Adam Vinatieri should be in on the first ballot. Again, I think the special teamers should be include a little bit more. I think Luke Kuechly, absolutely. A couple of times he led the league in tackles as well. I think he should get in on the first ballot. I think Marshall Yanda should get in on the first ballot, the guard from the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, 5 times I think he was an All-Pro, 8 Pro Bowls as well. I mean, this guy was one of the dominant guards in the league for a number of years. And I know O-lineman, it's a little harder to quantify, especially at the guard position. But I think those who know football and those who know how he played understand what he was and how good he was. And I think he deserves to be in. And then how do you keep Terrell Suggs out? Terrell Suggs is number 8 all time on the sack list. The guys ahead of him say their name in Hall of Fame. Bruce Smith, Reggie White, Kevin Green, Julius Peppers, Chris Dolman, Michael Strahan, Jason Taylor, Terrell Suggs. He has 14 more sacks than Dwight Freeney, who just got in to the Hall. So I don't know how you can't put him in on the first ballot. Now, maybe it won't be first ballot, but those would be my 4 first ballot guys: Vinatieri, Kuechly, Suggs, and Yanda. So we'll see.
Yeah, the other one that I think is going to be real interesting to watch is Earl Thomas. Earl Thomas for such a long stretch in those Legion of Boom secondaries. And I understand there's a lot of guys that are going to get, Richard Sherman we think is eventually going to be a Hall of Famer from that group there. Obviously, Cam Chancellor was a guy that was the hammer on that group. But Earl Thomas is what allowed that whole defense to function. Having a guy that could play the deep middle the way that he did. He was a member of the 2010s NFL All-Decade team. And you make an argument, best at his position for multiple years throughout that stretch. And so it didn't end great for him in Seattle in a lot of ways, but I think overall, Dad, that's a guy that could absolutely push for something close to that. Again, every position's got their own difficulty, like you said, with how it is in the Hall. We go wide receiver, that tends to be a logjam at that position for a lot of reasons. And so I don't know, first ballot is more of a vibe than it is an actuality for some of these positions based on the politics around each. But Earl Thomas is another one of those guys that was so synonymous when one of the named defenses of the NFL's time period, and the Legion of Boom defense was the early 2010s defensive choice. That guy was at the helm of all of it. A couple other interesting ones in there, too. Clay Matthews, friend of the show, another guy, one of the dominant college players of his time, part of a huge football family, was a mainstay for the Green Bay Packers for a long time, made the switch from rush linebacker to middle linebacker when they needed him to during his career. And then, we already talked about it, Luke Kuechly, around my age, also weird up here, and I know it's because his career was cut short due to injury as well, but Travis Frederick, the former Dallas Cowboys center, one of the greats there when Zach Martin first came into the league. It was him, Travis Frederick, and Tyron Smith were the young guys on that offensive line, and now one of them is up for the first bout of his first crack at the Hall of Fame. Is insane.
So I remember 2 classes ago, they were saying, well, we don't know if there's any first-timers in there, and whoever said that was out of their minds because Joe Thomas was in that class, and he was a guaranteed first-ballot Hall of Famer. Anybody who thought not, it should have your vote revoked. If you had to pick one person in this class that said this is a definite first ballot Hall of Famer, because listen, getting into the Hall of Fame is great, whether it's your first try or the last attempt that you get to still put that gold jacket on. But understand there's also pride involved as well of people that get voted in on the first ballot. If you had to pick one first ballot Hall of Famer out of this, who would it be?
Man, I give it to Luke. Like I think I'm biased because it was my era and I saw so much of him play.
Right.
But man, what he combined physically with what he combined mentally was otherworldly. What about you?
I would say Suggs. I mean, you can't be number 8 on the list with everybody above you basically being in the Hall of Fame and people below you being in the Hall of Fame, and you're number 8 on the sack list. I find that hard to overlook, so it would be mine. But I think Luke should get in too.
Ball So Hard University, stand up. You're in the Hall of Fame. Maybe. All right, Dad, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send everybody off into their day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern again, after our brief departure last week. On the DraftKingsNetwork.com, the YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and more. Thanks to our guests who joined us today, Micah Richards, Kate Abdo, and Thierry Henry as a part of CBS's coverage of the UEFA Champions League that, again, gets going back today. Round of 16 starts at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you missed any of that, you can check it out wherever you get your podcasts or available right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Dad, let's get to this, that, and the third. So we talked about the great Super Bowl commercials yesterday coming off this weekend, and it was pretty unanimous around here. The Dung Kings commercial with Tom Brady, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and J-Lo, one of the big winners of the weekend here, and they've decided to spin that off now. The tracksuits that were a part of that commercial that were an electric homage to one of the most famous coffee and breakfast brands in the country sold out within minutes yesterday of going up there. The whole outfit would run you about $160, $60 for the jacket and pants each, $40 for the bucket hat. Apparently now you can go and pre-order them. Again, now you're going to take a little bit of a wait for it, but Dad, as predicted, we thought it was going to make it to the Halloween costume for next year. It appears that this is just going to be the fit check for the rest of the winter around Massachusetts. I have a feeling you are going to see a lot of people in the greater Boston area jogging around the city wearing the Dung Kings outfit.
So, I mean, obviously, this is the commercial that won. There's also, you mentioned in the break, the behind the scenes kind of video as well that nowadays you make basically for everything. So this was kind of the big winner. But I will say they made a mistake. They absolutely made one mistake. The pricing. This sold out so quickly. They could have made this way more expensive and gotten way more money. I mean, $160 for the whole thing, $60 for the jacket, pants, $40 for the bucket hat. They could have jacked that price up, and they still would have sold out.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. We don't want capitalism to have all the fun here. It's good that it's an outfit that the people can afford. Dunkin's not supposed to be the elitist one. It's supposed to be the working man's brew.
Just saying. Oh, yeah, the working man's brew. The actors in there where we were working men. Huh? I mean, come on, man. I mean, that's the opportunity to make more money. Listen, I love that it was priced for a lot of people to get, but in this day and age, I was surprised it wasn't priced higher.
It doesn't sound like you like that it's that cheap here. I'm a little worried about you. I got my eye on you. Next time you start...
Surprised.
Listen, the next time we have a conversation amongst labor and ownership and Dad starts to side with the owners, that's when I'm really going to get worried here. But in the meantime, while we hunt down a Dung Kings outfit for us on Halloween, this might overtake my desire to go as my Scott Stapp Creed 2008 halftime performance at the Dallas Cowboys. We will move on to that, Dad, and that was the beautiful scenes that we saw. For the people that think we're overdoing it with Taylor Swift, you got a whole offseason where they're going to be on tour, having fun and not having to worry about this. We are going to get every last bit out of this we can because, Dad, the celebration videos, we already talked about Jason Kelce, who was a star of a postseason celebration for a team he did not play for, supporting his brother when the Kansas City Chiefs won. We did get the incredible image of Taylor Swift partying to her own song. And Dad, I got to ask you, neither of us have ever been musically inclined or gotten to experience this, but if you were an artist, how would you feel about going out in public and hearing your own music played and trying to enjoy it with a song that was technically work for you?
Oh, I think it's awesome, right? Isn't it awesome to have other people singing your song? I think one of the most amazing things, and we've both been to many concerts, is when the audience is singing your song, you know, as you're up on stage singing it. So I think it's great. I think it's cool. Obviously, no one's going to sing it like her, but I think it's a neat thing. I love when that happens.
I love that we got the hard launch from Taylor Swift, going on her TikTok, posting the video from the club of her with Travis and her parents in the club there. Everyone's stunned that we have seen such a new side of Taylor Swift, and we also, Dad, got to see from last year to this year. Travis Kelce, there was a video people pulled of the Chiefs Super Bowl celebration from last year where he hopped up on a bar and was dancing to Love Story by Taylor Swift by himself. Fast forward a year, and he is now dancing and kissing on the author of that song while he celebrates the Super Bowl. It's amazing what difference a year can make.
So the Chiefs parade is tomorrow, on Valentine's Day. They're having the championship parade. How soon? And Taylor Swift, I don't know when. I'm sure you'll know more than me. She's going to be off to Australia for a bit, I believe, playing. How soon do we think Travis is in Australia? She's been in his world, right, to all the games and the Super Bowl, and I know he's been to some concerts of hers. But now, if you go to Australia, which we all think he's probably going to do, you're going to be there. You're going to be in that VIP tent for a while, jamming and doing that whole thing.
Oh, yeah. If we saw him there during bye weeks and breaks during the season, my man is about to be in his touring era like crazy. And again, only thing we ask is you got to bring Jason for a little leg of the tour. It's going to get lonely. Taylor's going to be busy on tour. She's going to have a lot going on. I'm sure you can hang out with your future in-laws or her parents and do all that, but you're going to need a buddy for this. Jason clearly seems like he is ready to party for any occasion, and Jason Kelce meeting the Swiftie population that has already lovingly accepted Travis would be the perfect bit of off-season content for all of us and for New Heights. I'm producing for you guys here.
Except for the fact that Jason has his wife at home and 3 daughters, young daughters, by the way. Not sure how long that's going to play. You know, how long it's going to be. Go do your thing. You had a Hall of Fame career. He was out of his mind at the Super Bowl. Good for him. You love seeing it. But at some point, I think that, and even Jason knows, that's going to end. That is definitely going to end.
Well, he knows if he leaves the house long enough, his wife Kylie, who's been publicly campaigning for cats for a while that Jason's very out on, he's going to come back to a house chock full of kittens if he leaves for too long.
Exactly.
So, dangerous game he's getting ready to play. That being said, got to do it in the name of content. We'll wait and see. Dad, let's get to the third here. Tiger Woods had made the announcement a while back that he was leaving Nike, a partnership that had defined an era in golf for so many people. We finally got the new unveiling of Tiger Woods' upcoming brand after 27 years. On Monday, ahead of the Genesis Invitational that he is hosting and playing in, he announced that he is going to launch his active premium lifestyle brand called Sunday Red in conjunction with TaylorMade. So it's going to be a partnership. It's going to have its own headquarters, its own staff. It's going to be his own deal. But Dad, Tiger Woods Sunday Red, he's got his own logo now. That's a tiger with a stripe for every major that he's won here. I'm not going to lie. Upon the first unveiling, I was a little bit underwhelmed, if I'm being truthfully honest here. You are much more golf inclined than me, Dad. Do you see yourself buying Tiger Woods gear?
Oh, I will definitely get some Tiger Woods gear. And more importantly for Tiger Woods, everybody who is associated with golf and not, because he said they're going to make clothing for non-golfers as well, are going to buy the Tiger Woods gear. You may not like the logo as much as others, but it's Tiger Woods. And in all honesty, I'm surprised he didn't do this earlier. He has been big enough for a long enough time where he didn't. Now, it's nice to take the money from Nike that he was getting, but I'm surprised that he didn't do this a while ago because of his stature, that he could have started his own branding company. In our business, it's akin to some of the people we work with, like a Colin Cowherd or a Dan Patrick, working for a company, but then going out and starting their own company, you know, the podcast business, you know, for Colin, the volume. And that's kind of the comparison I make in our business is guys who have started their own companies in this. Tiger could have done this a while ago. Tiger, it's ridiculous. Remember, he's just a partner with TaylorMade, but he has his own and everything else. He is going to make so much more money, not that he needs it. It is going to be unbelievably popular to buy, Mike. You know, everybody's going to feel like they have to have it because they had the Nike Tiger Woods stuff. Now you get your own Tiger Woods stuff.
Yeah, printing money, Tiger Woods, something that he's never been familiar with at all. Thoughts and prayers. Yeah. Somehow we think he'll be able to survive on the meal tickets coming off this one here. We hope you survived another episode of this podcast coming off our stint in Las Vegas. My voice is finally almost coming back. I feel basically human again at this point, and so we're going to push onward into the rest of this week here. If you enjoyed it, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live every day from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.